I'm JJ Hunt of Talk Description to Me, and you are listening to the Audio Description Narrators of America Know Your Narrator series, Beyond Your Narrator episode.
With Colleen Connor. Thanks so much for joining us, Colleen.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Colleen is a motivational speaker, an audio description editor, a podcast host, and a YouTube channel host for Blind Inspiration Cast. She's the voice of the consumer. She's the assistant director of the audio description training retreats. Taking a breath here. You do it all, Colleen. Let's just jump right in. What do you love about audio description?
I hate audio description.
Yes.
So it's very funny. I think it's one of those things where when you work on something so much, it eventually gets really frustrating. And you're like, you know what? I hate this. I hate it. So I have really came into the world of audio description through museum work. And what's really odd is I majored in musical theater and I was in DC. I never knew about audio description. No one ever told me. DC is one of the founding cities of audio description, and I was never told about it for theater or anything. And so I actually worked in a museum downtown, and that's when I figured out audio description. And I just kind of fell into it based on reading the scripts and going, this isn't very good. And I decided to rewrite some stuff for people. And of course, at the time, I was a little naive and didn't offer a contract, etc. Now I know better. So it was very interesting kind of into the audio description world. And then it sort of consumed my life and the direction that it went to as I started going to conferences, and that's actually where I met my business partner, Jan Volgaropoulos. We met at a conference, and she contacted me afterwards and said, hey, I never see the training and feedback that I actually want. So I was thinking about creating it. Do you want to do the class with me? And I decided to say yes. So we created this business in 2015, and we immediately had interest for training. There were so many people already doing audio description, and as we know, it's still all over the place. So there were people who came to us who had been doing audio description for 20 years just off the cuff. There were people doing it for television and film who had listened to a couple episodes or something of another audio description show and then just started doing it. So I sort of became really passionate about, there needs to be training, and there needs to be some kind of quality control. I've written a lot and edited a lot in my career as it was. That's sort of once I was rejected as an actress enough, I was like, okay, I need a break. And so I did a lot of writing and editing, and I found myself doing the same for people's scripts for audio description and their voiceover for audio description. And then in doing this class, Jan and I started to amass a network of people, and we realized that, we really were connecting to a tight-knit community of people and network that we were establishing. I would say about 2 years ago is when audio description really took off. After Netflix decided to be, 100% audio description, and other companies they started looking for writers and looking for voice artists. And so a lot of people started actually getting work and actually getting paid work. That's when I think in the past couple years, we've sold out almost every retreat that we do. I was actually elected to the subject matter expert committee in the United States for establishing the certification for audio description. So it is being worked on. It is a long and difficult process. We've been working for over a year and still have a lot of work to do to establish a certification, a testing for describers. So that's kind of where I sit right now. And it's very weird when I talk to people because I sort of fell into it and just was immersed in the world of it and talked to everybody and started training people. And it's really strange to be called an expert. I'm like, what? Okay. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think it's funny that, you can fall into things and then sort of it takes off and you're like, all right, this is what I'm doing right now. So
It does seem like there's something in the air when it comes to quality. I love how you talked about someone who has experience, maybe even 20 years of experience, that still isn't, I mean, you said it isn't good. What makes it good?
good audio description is very objective. I think that a lot of people, they think there might be a perfect solution for audio description, but it's both a science and an art. So it's difficult to quantify what is good audio description because you're never going to please everybody. There's audio description all across the world. The UK actually developed a certification a little while ago, and they've had more quality control and stuff. But they do description a little bit differently than people in the US. It depends on who you were exposed to, if you were trained or introduced in one of the sort of rare classes that goes on, or if you sort of heard of it and are self-taught, or if you mentored with somebody. I think that there are people who have a natural knack for it. And there are people who maybe should be writers and not try and voice it. Or there are voices that really aren't suited to description that can really distract from a film or a project. So it's a number of things, including, the script and the actual text of the description. If you're describing so much that every single silence or space in a film or a play is just filled with you talking about as much as possible. And similarly with voices, sometimes people can become very distracting if they're sort of acting, or you realize that you go up at the end of everything you say, and it becomes very distracting. So there are habits people have that they don't realize. And I think in the blind community, we're also just so grateful for any kind of recognition and sort of acknowledgement and inclusion that we tend to be a little bit like, no, it was great, because kind of anything is better than nothing. Mm. I think what makes good description, you can tell when someone is empathetic, so they're able to put themselves in the shoes of someone who is blind or visually impaired, someone who realizes that the majority of your audience has seen before or can still see a little bit. So there's only like 2% of blind people that are congenitally blind, which means they've never seen. So if you're adventitiously blind, you've grown blind over time, or something happened with an accident or an illness, we've seen before. And so when you go to describe things, you do want to describe something like color, because blind people, we still live in the world, and color is a choice. It has significance. So I think that when they don't dumb it down, when somebody doesn't lower it to some sort of like we need to be talked down to, or we need to have things explained to us because we're clearly not going to know what's going on. So I think, again, recognizing who your audience is and acknowledging that, and then being observant. You can tell people who are able to observe the small choices and inconsistencies in a film or television show. And then the editing, not only the quality of the vocals and making sure the levels are good, it doesn't too loud or too soft, and someone's ability to less is more is a huge phrase that people say a lot in description. And that's kind of what I talked about with somebody filling in absolutely every silence. You don't have to do that. There are things that we're going to miss. There are things that you just can't, you don't have time. You just can't describe it, especially in film and television. Editing and pace of films go so quickly that you really have to just go with it and edit yourself down. If you're a writer, if you wear all of the hats, write and voice yourself, you have to be able to edit yourself. And the last thing that I think makes description the final touch, like that was good, is when someone gets feedback from someone who is a consumer and knows what they're talking about or what the project wants. If you have an actual real live blind person listening to your stuff, they should give feedback. They should give honest feedback. It's important to be able to take criticism, first of all, and then try and incorporate, if their comments make sense for the project, then try and incorporate those finishing touches. Unfortunately, a lot of times with description, things are so fast. You get to preview a performance twice and then you're describing it live. Or you're doing a TV show and the contract is, okay, in 82 hours, please have this script to us. And so in the creative world, it is hard to take that extra time, but you can tell when description was spent time on and observed and, really had someone else listen to it and say, hey, even if it's like, hey, you repeated that line twice, I guess you just didn't notice in the edit. Or, there's mistakes that make their way through all the time. And I think really good description just is those qualities of a good describer. You really want to think about what you're good at as a person. And I think also what's fun is we like to say in our training, introverts are welcome. Oftentimes we find that people who are very introverted are actually better describers because they're used to listening and observing more so than being the person in a conversation or speaking first and someone who interrupts and kind of is very lively as an extroverted person. Not that they can't do it, but we find a lot that, introverted people succeed pretty quickly in description just because of the way that their brains work.
What a great discovery for the introvert angle.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are so afraid, thinking, I'm going to be talking in front of people. No. And it's like, if you think about it, when you're in a theater or a live performance space, it's more like talking to a friend next to you in the dark about what's going on. Your audience doesn't see you, both literally and figuratively. They, hopefully you might be able to get feedback from people, but they can't see you and they're watching the performance, and it's more like you're sort of a narrator for them as to what's going on. And then with film and television, you can simply be a writer or an editor or quality control of some kind, or you could just voice. Or like I said, a lot of people now, especially with COVID, the pandemic, they have home studios. And so a lot of people are doing a lot of their own work, kind of, like I said, wearing a lot of hats. They're directing themselves, voicing it themselves, writing it themselves. And so it's a different kind of public speaking. And it is taking out the public part of it, I think. You have to know your audience, but you're not actually standing up in front of people and really performing. And that's what makes good description as well, is that speaking is different than talking. We talk with gestures and facial expressions, and if you're voicing a cartoon or a commercial, there's a certain amount of expression and things that you're putting all that into your voice. When you do description, it's much more of a neutral sort of, you want to match the vacuity of the piece, but you don't want to act where, again, your voice is distracting from what's going on, the dialogue and the sound effects. So I think that's kind of why it's, no, introverts, come on in.
Let's say in a TV show or a movie, that there is a tightrope walk, that just a plain old neutral voice isn't going to work. But if you're the armchair quarterback cheering on whatever's happening, that's also going to be distracting. That what I'm hearing is a lot of the acting training, whether in voiceover or on camera acting, that who you're talking to and what your intentions are do play into a good performance. And I use the word performance carefully with audio description voicing, that tightrope, it's that sweet spot. And I think earlier you said about the science and the art, that it is, there are objective elements here. It's just a fascinating discussion just on the voice side. And now you're talking also about the writing side and the editing side, that with so many barriers to audio description quality, you've named, timing with the editing. You've talked about the delivery, the dumbing down of the language of the actual audio description script, or what the words that are being said, that all of these are barriers. Are there any other barriers that you're really proud of how you as a training retreat are helping professionals overcome?
I think one of the biggest things that I am very proud of, as is Jan, style of our curriculum. We don't allow more than 8 people in each of our trainings because we want you to practice. We actually have them describe an entire film by the end of our retreat, taking turns scene by scene as sort of clips of the film play, and they get that experience and they get a recording of it. We give them a recording at the end so they can go back and listen and critique themselves. And we also give them feedback. I think something, again, that's invaluable is that feedback. And a barrier for a lot of people is they cannot hear themselves. I know that sometimes, not only like when you listen back to your voice in a recording, you're like, oh God, is that what I sound like? But when you're speaking, you don't realize maybe you have a very sibilant S. So I know that I do, which means my S's hiss a little bit. I hit them pretty hard. And so when I'm doing vocal work, I have to consciously go, okay, watch the S's and go. Because someone told me that. I never thought in my life that I said something strange. My family is Irish, so there's a few words that I would say that are not the same word as, and someone would be like, no, I don't know why you said it like that, but it is not, it's this. And I'd be like, so it's a barrier of self, I think, that Jan and I are very proud of. People get really nervous and vocal quality, and they get jammed up about themselves and their own performance. And by the end of the retreat, we really try and encourage them to just go for it. Just say what you see. Just if you make a mistake, just pause and then pick it back up. There's no need to freak out. And then people will give you feedback. If there's quality to your voice or a quality to what you described, if you stepped on the dialogue the entire time, as in you kept talking over the actors, we'll give you the note of, remember, you really gotta, you cannot step on someone's performance. You cannot hear 2 things at once, and you won't understand either of them. So it's that, I think that sort of self-barrier and self-consciousness and lack of practice or ability to just go and experiment and talk about it, that I'm really proud of in giving my students confidence and skill to move forward.
It's a great comparison with the barrier of self. I've not heard that before, and it aligns with so many other performance and professional aspects. I'd also like to find out more about some places that you'd like audio description to go in your dream world of the future. What would that be?
I think it has the great potential to become part of independence in blind people's lives. Technology has given us so much in the last 20, 30 years that things continue to improve, where now our devices talk to us. I have more power in my phone right now than they had on the first moon lander. So it's, technology has moved so far that we are starting to be able to integrate into society a lot more, and our independence continues to grow. There's a big divide in the generations that I've noticed, in the older population being like, I'm not going to get a smartphone. I have a dumb phone and I don't care. So it's that generation of people where you realize they were super sheltered. And, maybe I think parents have a say in that. You're afraid for your children or people you're in charge of. And so they shelter them, and you don't have as many social skills. You don't have any advantages as far as your education and really appearing confident and ready to go in society. I think, just as something brutal to put out there, but a lot of blind people or people with disabilities can appear very awkward and very socially inept, because there simply wasn't exposure. There wasn't the ability to talk to anyone in the world. There wasn't the ability to take classes online or work from home, or that's all starting to be acknowledged. Sadly, super late in the game, but we're now starting to see disability rights really take off. I think for me, audio description comes into that equality. Again, not necessarily audio description, what a great little thing I can do where I'm listening to a TV show now and I can talk to someone about a TV show. But the idea of access to information and education is an access need. It's not a wish or a desire. It now is starting to be, no, this is an access need. So people are just now, and I would love to see it more, able to get audio description in the classroom while they're learning, so that you don't have to be removed from the regular classroom. You don't have to, as a blind student, automatically be behind just because you can't see. So, the immersiveness in education and the ability to experience different cultures. I think when you have many more films and television being described, it's so much better for people to be exposed to the world. Again, with technology, with being able to sit down at a performance and listen to someone describe it, to sit there in the audience. You don't have to be outside. Everybody knows what a ramp is for. A ramp is so people who are on wheels or have other mobility devices can get into a building. And for a long time, I feel like even in my lifetime, there was no ramp for blind people. It just was, oh, the equipment doesn't work. Oh, well. Like, oh, this audio description, what's that? Here, you want the captions? You want to read the captions? It's like, no, it's someone speaking, describing the film. Oh, I don't know if we have that. What is that? And so I continue to advocate for just the awareness of audio description and how it could be involved in blind people's lives in all aspects, to label and describe your clothing, how you cook, frozen meals, and what you could get out of being a part of society more, going to museums, going out with people. There's a huge amount of culture and socialization that is about being able to discuss pop culture and what's going on and what interests people. And I think with education sort of coming up being able to, we don't just have magnifiers and like jaws speaking to us. It's someone actually giving us an equal footing for a class or any sort of artistic event. It could be applied to so much, and it's hard to see it not invested, because people think of it as, oh, that's for people with disabilities. Oh, audio description, that's for people who have issues. Instead of, oh, as a sighted person, I don't know, this is just really cool to listen to. Or I could be driving in the car and catching up on the TV shows that I like, because at this point it's kind of more like an audiobook. So that stigma of, oh, this is for people who are special, is, I think, starting to fall away as more awareness of audio description happens. And so I would just love it to be more considered an access need and bringing that equality, rather than, oh, that might be something nice for this person as an extra.
Is there a good way to reach you, either on social media, your YouTube channel, your podcasts, your company?
Yes. So for me personally, in reviewing accessibility and public speaking, that is Blind Inspiration Cast, which my channel on YouTube is called Blind Inspiration Cast. The picture is of me and my guide dog, Joplin, who is a Golden Retriever Lab mix. So I am at blindinspirationcast@gmail.com. On Twitter, it's just @inspirationcast. And then if you want to get in touch with Jan and I, anything to do with audio description or training, our website is AD, as in audio description, adtrainingretreats.com. And our email is sort of the same. So adtrainingretreats@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for joining us, Colleen.